Well, good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear. Welcome to the Baker Institute at Rice University and to this conversation with our distinguished guest, Dr. Vartan Gregorian. It's truly a pleasure to have him here. We didn't think we could build a stage strong enough for two Armenian Americans to be on top of in one sitting, but here we are. But we're truly delighted to have Vartan here. One of Vartan's quotes is that everybody is somebody, so you don't have to introduce anybody. I'm going to defy that quotation. You have his prolific biography in the program and your program notes. Vartan documented much of his private life in his autobiography that he wrote in 2003, The Road Home, My Life and Times. And it's truly one of these wonderful American stories of an immigrant who comes to America and makes such major contributions not only to his new country but to the world, and in Vartan's case, the world of intellect and the academy, and in so many different ways. He is a recipient of the Ellis Island Medal of Honor as one of our most distinguished people to come to this country and make such great contributions. As you probably know, he's a great academic, PhD in History and Humanities from Stanford, and he served on the faculties of several American universities, including here in Texas at UT in Austin. He joined the faculty of the University of Pennsylvania, and he became the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences there and the Provost. And then he served as president of the New York Public Library, an 8-year tenure, which I think will prove to be one of his greatest and lasting legacies. Then chosen to become president of Brown University, and then, I believe in 1997, selected as president of the Carnegie Corporation of New York. Now, Vartan has an incredible reputation, I'm green with envy, of being one of the world's best fundraisers. He raised $400 million to save the New York Public Library, and later, as president of Brown, tripled the university's endowment. And now at Carnegie, he's giving away money. So you've come, what goes around comes around. I don't know if it's apocryphal, but I've heard a story about Vartan that some major donor just informed him that he was making a very significant gift. And Vartan thanked him profusely, but then looked at him and he said, "John, I really thought you were worth more than that." He's received the National Humanities Medal and the highest civilian award in the United States, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he's an incredible 56 honorary degrees. So please join me in welcoming Vartan Gregorian to Rice University. Vartan Gregorian has written a book which I highly recommend, Islam, a Mosaic, Not a Monolith, which is the subject that we have in the program notes. It is a book that he wrote for the general American public, and it is one of the best monographs on understanding Islam, and I truly recommend it for anyone who is interested in this very critical issue today. I just want to read one to set the framework of the conversation, one paragraph in the book. The fact is that there is no unified Muslim world or unified Muslim ideology, just as there is no unified Christian world or unified Christian ideology, nor unified Buddhist world or unified Buddhist ideology, no unified Jewish world or unified Jewish ideology. Recall that there is no single accepted Islamic theology, no single interpretation of Islamic law, no single issue around which all Muslim societies are willing to rally their people, futures, or fortunes. This is very important to understand the complexity of Islam. The fact that really a minority of Muslims are Arabs, that the large population of Muslims are elsewhere in the world, especially in Southeast Asia, in India, in Pakistan. The complexity of the Islamic world is something that I think is the first stage toward understanding some of the great challenges we face in the world, and especially in the Middle East today. So we're really honored to have you here today to really educate us and for us to gain from your wisdom. And I would like to note that one of the issues, Vartan, that now is looming very large because so much ink has been spilled in commentary on Iraq and the Arab-Israeli conflict, but you were born in Tabriz, Iran. And what I would like to ask you is, if you had the opportunity to talk to the President of the United States on Iran, to communicate with him, what would you tell him?
Well, funny you ask. I wrote a letter, but I did not finish completely, that if President Bush had asked me to draft a letter for him to send to President of Iran, thus to the Iranian people, nation, that I would have written the following letter, and I'm going to read portions of it for you, because I think there was a great missed opportunity not to respond to letters of Ahmadinejad and his speeches, because the letters are not to him the same way as his letters are not to us, I mean to government, but to people of the United States and the world. And I thought his letter should not have been 18 pages, but 40 pages, President's letter. Then every Iranian newspaper, television had to report that to the whole Iranian nation. And if anybody who suppressed it, it would have been, it would sell like a hot pancake. So, with your permission, I'd like to read pieces of it. And I won't be, I hope I don't get carried away, because this is, I've spent lots of time to see how I can write like an Iranian, American, to Iranians, in order to score all kinds of points. So let's see whether I succeed or not.
Please don't leave it in Persian.
No. I said, Mr. President, your letters, your recent speeches at the UN, and some of your other public utterances have prompted me to review once again the rich history of Iran, the U.S.-Iranian relations, and the outstanding issues confronting our countries for the benefit of Iranian American peoples. First, let me state for the record that we are cognizant of Iran's glorious history, its rich cultural legacy, and its contribution to the world civilization. Some 2,500 years ago, Iranians gave us Zoroastrianism, a religion based on the principles of constant struggle between good and evil and the ultimate triumph of good over evil, the supremacy of Bahru Mazda, the great God, the creator of the earth. Then I go to advocate, I'm just trying to paraphrase, the fact that Iranians introduced free will in choosing between good and evil, and its centrality in the outcome of the battle of good over evil. Belief in the day of judgment, Zoroastrians believed, when all the accounts will be there and all the deeds will be weighed. Zoroaster also preached the gospel of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. In the 6th century BC, Iranians gave us Cyrus and Darius the Great. Cyrus, in his famous cylinder, ordered in his empire that all should be free to worship their gods without impediment or persecution. This proclamation of religious freedom, unique for its time and even later in the history, was accompanied by tolerance for cultural diversity and freedom for the empire's many people of many tongues. Cyrus ended the Babylonian captivity of the Jews, allowed them to return to Palestine, supported their rights to live by biblical laws, and helped them to rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem. Here I wanted to say, without the Iranians, we would not have current problems in the Middle East. Cyrus' policy of respect for diversity and the recognition of religious and rights of the empire's subjects was followed by his successors, thus making the Achaemenid Empire the most tolerant and pluralistic of its kind in history. The Achaemenid Empire, which extended from India, and so I don't have to go there. Another noteworthy feature of the Achaemenid Empire and its successors, notably Sassanids, was the rich culture, respect for scientific and philosophical endeavors. In pursuit of knowledge, Iranians were not afraid of interacting with other cultures and benefiting from their achievements. On the contrary, they actively sought scientists and philosophers of other countries. The famous Sassanid Emperor Khosrov Anushirvan invited Greek philosophers and Christian scientists and Jews persecuted by Romans to his court. The University of Jundi Shapur, located in present-day Ahvaz, thus became a center of learning where Iranian and foreign scientists and philosophers interacted. This university later became the model for subsequent universities in the region, such as those in Baghdad, Cairo, and in Europe. Iran's civilization is marked by a remarkable and almost unprecedented degree of continuity. Although Iran was conquered by the Arabs in 7th century, a very sore point whenever you mention to Iranians that Arabs conquered Iran in 7th century, because some Iranians still believe that God should have chosen an Iranian as prophet rather than Arab, but only in the privacy of their room would mention that. And the Iranians converted to Islam. They retained their language, culture, history, traditions, and hence their distinct identity. Moreover, Iranian civilization influenced every aspect of Islamic civilization, from administration, politics, religion, to the arts, to spread from India to Spain with the spread of Islam. Iranians even merged some of their ancient beliefs into the new Islamic form and contributed to the evolution of Shia religion, Shia Islam. With its rich humanistic and mystical dimensions, Iranian poets and mystics, philosophers produced the richest body of literature in the Islamic world. Iran underwent more trials and tribulations for more than 3 centuries before being unified by Safavids in the 16th century. But even during periods of domination by the Turks and the Mongols, Iranians' artistic and scientific spirit survived and flourished. The miniatures produced in Tabriz and Herat in 14th and 15th centuries, and poets and scientists such as Omar Khayyam and Jalaluddin Rumi and Attar testified to the endurance of Iranian spirit under worse conditions. The Safavid period from 1509 to 1722 marked another episode of Iranian Renaissance, best manifested in the glorious city of Isfahan. More importantly, Safavid king Shah Abbas revived Iran's ancient tradition of religious tolerance and attested by his kind treatment of Iran's Christians and by the welcome he offered to those, including Jews and others in his empire. It was this reputation that prompted Europe's Christian powers to seek his collaboration. Mr. President, throughout the history, Iran's greatest weapon has not been its armies nor its material wealth. It has been its culture, endowed with a rich language traceable through written documents over a period of 2,700 years. The beneficiary of Iranian gifts to draw on these other rich civilizations, Assyrian, Greek, Roman, Indian, and to create a uniquely Iranian synthesis, Iranian culture has survived and thrived. It has been this culture that has enabled Iranians to conquer their many Macedonian, Arab, Turk, Mongol, Tatar, Uzbek conquerors. Having noted that Iran's great cultural legacy and its contributions to the world civilization, let me, Mr. President, turn to the main issue of the history of U.S.-Iranian relations. First of all, let me state that we, the Americans, are proud of the fact that during 19th century and the first half of 20th century, our missionaries worked in Iran. No, they did not convert many Muslims to Christian faith. To the best of my knowledge, there were not many converts. But they founded the first modern hospitals in Iran. and the first modern educational institutions which opened educational opportunities to a multitude of Iranians. In 1856, the U.S. granted Iran a most favored nation treaty agreement, welcome Iranian students, trade, and trade. When Iranians launched their constitutional movement and revolution in 1906 to 1911, we welcomed it. The American missionary Howard Baskerville joined the Constitutionalists and was martyred in Tabriz in 1909. He is even today revered by Iranians as one of the heroes of constitutional revolution. Once a constitutional monarchy was established in Iran, we tried to help consolidate it. Iranians welcomed this help. We invited Dr. Morgan Schuster, who was deeply sympathetic to Iran's difficult conditions, to organize their customs in order to reduce their reliance on Great Britain and Russia by securing for Iran an independent source of income. After being forced to leave Iran under Russian and British pressures, Morgan wrote The Strangling of Persia, in which he highlighted the nefarious impact of British and Russian imperialism on every aspect of Iran's economic, social, and political life. Despite its neutrality during First World War, Iran was invaded by Russia and Ottomans. The U.S., Mr. President, defended Iran's territorial integrity and welcomed the delegation to Versailles Conference. President Woodrow Wilson announced his determination to completely ignore the secret agreements concerning the establishment of Anglo-Russian influence zones over Iran. After Allied occupation of Iran in 1941 during World War II and exile of Reza Shah, the ruler of Iran, the U.S. and its allies retained the institutional monarchy as a symbol of Iran's territorial integrity and the continuity of its statehood. The Tehran Declaration of 1943, adopted because of the American initiative, committed the Allied powers to maintain Iran's territorial integrity. At the end of the war, it was the U.S. that once again protected Iran's territorial integrity by forcing the Soviet Union to withdraw its troops from northern Iran and by unraveling the Soviet-supported autonomous republics of Azerbaijan and Kurdistan. The U.S. also prevented the Soviet Union from monopolizing natural and energy resources of northern Iran. After the outbreak of the Cold War between USSR and U.S. and its allies, we recognized Iran's pivotal strategic position and its centrality as a major regional power. We helped Iran build its armed forces by providing training and military assistance, which between 1953 to 1978 included delivery of every advanced weaponry only available to our NATO allies. The modernization of the Iranian armed forces was one of the major factors, incidentally, that made Iran a regional power in the 1970s and allowed it successfully resist the Iraqi armed aggression in September 1980. U.S. accepted Iran's decision to nationalize its oil industry and successfully resisted Great Britain's decision to seize Iranian oil fields by force, and later helped Iran modernize its oil industry. American press compared Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh as Thomas Paine and Jefferson of Iran, and Time magazine named him in 1981 as Man of the Year. And President Truman invited him to the White House and supported his claims to Iranian oil. These actions enabled Iran to raise its oil production and prices, which gave it the necessary revenues to modernize its economy, its army, and its physical and social infrastructure of the country. Mr. President, during the height of the Cold War, both the U.S. and allies and the Soviet Union and its partners made various miscalculations and policy mistakes. Obsessed with each other's monolithic doctrines and policies, they both misjudged the nature of such historic and cultural forces as nationalism and religion. It was this perhaps excessive fear that led us to support the forces opposed to the nationalist government of Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh and precipitated his demise. We did not realize and appreciate at the time that nationalist and democratic Iran would be a great counterforce to communism. We did not appreciate the sagacity of the Iranian nationalist leadership and its power of nationalism. We were wrong. The U.S. accepted the Islamic Revolution of Iran and throughout 1979 endeavored to establish workable relationship with it. Contrary to Iran's propaganda, we did not break diplomatic relations with Iran in response to Iranian revolution. We did so only after, in violation of international law, Iranians occupied the U.S. embassy in Tehran and took hostage 56 of our diplomats and kept them for 444 days. Mr. President, no country, certainly no country in possession of the economic, political, and military power of the United States would have tolerated such a breach of international law. Yet, the U.S. restrained its response because the powerful have the options not to exercise their power. The U.S. chose that option not out of weakness, but out of a sense of responsibility. The U.S. acted in that manner because it believed in the common sense of the Iranians, because it distinguished between the Iranian government and the Iranian people. The U.S. restraint should not be confused with U.S. weakness. And I go on, so I don't want to read more, but let me just finish it. Let me see which passages may be much more tantalizing than the ones. The U.S. hoped that eventually reason would prevail. We reluctantly put up with the situation because of our belief and hope that the character of the long-term relationship of our peoples and countries would be positive and mutually beneficial. Let me state emphatically that our decision not to intervene unilaterally, militarily, was not a sign of weakness. It was the manifestation of the restraint and reason that only the powerful can afford. Given the fateful impact of the hostage crisis on U.S.-Iran relations, I'm very surprised, while abroad, Iranian authorities never mentioned the crucial event in the history of our two countries, namely this hostage crisis. Mr. President, the United States is very proud that prior to the severance of our diplomatic relations, and even since then, our universities and colleges have provided opportunities for higher education and professional training to over 100,000 Iranian students, including doctors, engineers, architects, and scholars in the social sciences and humanities. We're proud that nearly 1 million Iranian Americans live in the United States. They are fully integrated in the American society and participate in every aspect of our country's life and make a significant contribution in many areas. They have an impressive record of academic, professional, and financial success, having taken full advantage of the opportunities that our free society offers to all our citizens. Like other Americans, they enjoy full political, cultural, and religious freedom. They have their own media, print, radio, and newspaper. Now, it's long, I don't want to read more, but let me tell you what else I say. I deal with the issue of nuclear weapons. I have to read the dates only. We welcome your recent statements that the Islamic Republic of Iran is a member of the International Atomic Energy Agency and is committed to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We welcome your pledge, this is to the President, that all your nuclear activities are transparent, peaceful, and under the watchful eyes of the IAEA inspector. We ask, why then are these objectives to our legally recognized, you ask, why then are these objections to our legally recognized right? We have never been against Iran's right to peaceful nuclear power program, included. Indeed, it was the U.S. that concluded the first agreement with Iran as long ago as 1957, for cooperation concerning civil uses of atomic energy. In 1967, we provided Iran with a pool-type 5-megawatt reactor and its fuel. We supported, established, and, along with Europe, permitted and encouraged hundreds of Iranian students who studied and constituted, therefore, later scientific infrastructure, contributed scientific infrastructure of Iran. We welcomed the establishment of the Atomic Energy Organization in Iran, Americans, in 1974. In 1975, Iran and U.S. signed a $15 billion agreement for the construction of 8 nuclear reactors in Iran. We encouraged MIT to sign a contract with Iran to provide training for Iranian nuclear engineers. In 1977, in 1975, 73, under President Ford, Kissinger, you wouldn't guess who were in the cabinet at the time, when we encouraged Iran to get nuclear weapons, nuclear energy. Cheney and Rumsfeld were members at that time. In all fairness to them, Kissinger overruled them that we trust the Shah, we should give whatever he wants. But anyway, this is not something new. In 1977, Iran and U.S. signed, again exchanged nuclear technology and nuclear safety. In 1978, United States granted Iran most favored nation status for spent fuel reprocessing. The same year, the United States-Iran Nuclear Energy Agreement was signed to facilitate cooperation in the field of nuclear energy and to govern the export and transfer of equipment and material to Iran. The issue is not peaceful uses of nuclear energy for medical and other purposes. The issue is whether certain elements in the Iranian government would take the next step and enable and unleash a nuclear weapons program. Our aim is to prevent that possibility. That is why we're open to the notion of Russia to provide you with uranium for nuclear energy and then retrieve it. Or in the case you are unwilling to conclude a specific foreign government agreement because of their unreliability, we also would welcome the International Atomic Energy Agency to own uranium and lend it to you and retrieve it from you after use. As long as you are a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and agree to the strict rules of verification of the appropriate use of uranium. Both Secretary Rice and I have reiterated the fact that we are ready to end 3 decades-old policy of the U.S. not to have direct talks with Iran. We are ready to sit down with you and discuss all the issues that separate us and in areas of common endeavor and concern and your legitimate aspirations and interests as a major regional power, once you suspend your uranium enrichment program. Your determination to continue it will have a nefarious impact on the future development of the region, starting a nuclear race among other states with the knowledge, know-how, and the resources to develop such nuclear energy, but also nuclear weapons as well, for the sake of achieving parity and military balance vis-à-vis Iran. Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, all have expressed such desires. Your assertion that Islam, by its very nature, is incapable and incompatible with owning and using atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, is unfortunately not reassuring. We have indeed seen Pakistan, a Muslim state, had no problem of developing an atomic weapon. Perhaps Shia Iran, you know where I'm going, is more orthodox and more reliant on the spirit of Islam than others, under circumstances, would develop it. But the international community, as expressed through their various resolutions at the UN, does not want to take the chance. We, the United States, are not against Iran. If we were, why would we help end two prominent long-term opponents of you, namely Saddam Hussein and the Taliban, without negotiating with you specific concessions that allowed you to become once again a regional power? Then I better stop because otherwise the whole thing would take. Basically, what I'm trying to show are the contradictions, and this is for the Iranian people, that U.S.-Iranian relations, with the exception of Mosaic period, we've not had many problems except the Shah's support for the Shah. And that the idea of nuclear energy was our idea to convince Iran under the Shah in 1973 before that Iran needs nuclear energy. So, and then end up by quoting Imam Ali, founder or the head of spiritual founder, symbolic founder of Shia religion, on his name that was done, who says, we are tolerant religion. You either are a believer, we'll tolerate you. If you're not even a believer, you're a human being, we have to tolerate and respect you. That quote was given by Khatami at St. Andrews University when he got an honorary degree last year. So I constantly refer also to President Khatami. Your predecessor has said this, we agree with him. And a spiritual leader has said this. But basically, I'm tracing through a form of letter all the issues dividing us. And I deal with also Holocaust issue and denial of Holocaust by Ahmadinejad, saying you can be against Israel policies and so on, but you don't have to be against the Holocaust. Especially you, Shias, who appreciate martyrdom. You know the pain. Every year you relive the martyrdom of Hassan and Hussein. Why would you demean another nation's people's suffering, which is so well documented, and to which you agree that is a historical fact? I mean, Nejad did an interview with Ali Wimut, said it's a historical fact. And why would you insult our African Americans and all the citizens by having a former head of Grand Dragon of Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, bring to Tehran, and in order to have him deny the Holocaust? And why would you deny when Iran itself in 1942 accepted 152,000 Polish Jews and others who lost thousands of them on the road to come to Iran in order to take refuge, when you yourself know that in Tabriz many of them are buried there on the road? So why deny when your politics, why should politics be used to deny human suffering? And I quote there from Khatami and all the others. It goes on all the way till I also quote the Iraq report of yours, that we have many things in common. We both want unified Iraq. We don't want sectarian war. We both want drug war to succeed because there are 2 million Iranian heroin addicts now and hundreds of thousands HIV. And your 70 million Iranians, 70% are, guess what, under 30. And you need work and you need economic development. India, Asia, China, all of them are progressing. And Iranians have the know-how. Why is it important to exercise your knowledge when nobody questions that you have the knowledge? Why don't you celebrate your knowledge and go on with it and restore eventually diplomatic and relations and so forth, including most favorite nation treaty, the World Trade Organization with Europe and others, when 60% of your trade is with Europe, when also your Constitution of 1979 makes number one obligation of the state to provide equitable living standards and economic development of Iran. And this is one way, this 25-page letter. I was trying to make 44. I stopped. Trying to, for the general public, both in the United States and in Iran, to show how much we have in common in Iraq and in also Kurdistan, I hope we'll discuss this, that there are forces in the United States who portray Iran as a multi-ethnic and therefore not a real state. There are forces in the United States that Iraq is an artificial creation. Well, isn't Kuwait, isn't Qatar, isn't all the Emirates? What state can you take in the Middle East other than Egypt and Morocco and others that would not be considered that you're an artificial creature of colonial powers and their design? So I hope I will publish this, and I'll send to each one of you a copy. And I'm saying that I'm not, President Bush is not responsible for contents. I have put together all President Bush's statements in the past that we're not against Islam, we're not against Iran, and we're only against terrorists. And all the Condi Rice statements, all the President Madeleine Albright, President Clinton, I've summarized all of them. 80% of them agree on this, and I'm trying to show these are possibilities rather than assertions. Thank you for your forbearance. I got so excited, got carried away.
Thank you very much, Vartan.
Thank you.
How do you assess the power structure in Iran in terms of the receptivity of such a letter? It would be to Ahmadinejad, but at the same time, we have the Ayatollah Khamenei, we have all these power, divisions of power. You mentioned Khatami several times, who represents one tendency. What is your assessment of the power structure within Iran? To me, there's a basic contradiction between the system that Khomeini established, the Vilayat al-Fiqh, the jurists rule, the supreme leader, Islamic leader, a really theological system in Iran. And at the other end of the spectrum, they have a parliamentary democracy. And so therefore you have this very, very theological regime at the top, and then you have these parliamentary elections in which elections really are held and women vote, and they're relatively free and unfettered elections.
Well, this is the very paradox of Iran. After 30 years, many people don't remember the Shah's period, or Mossadegh or others. They become symbols. In the letter, I also mentioned that for 27 years you've been telling death to America, death to great Satan, and demonstrations, you burn the American flag. So why is it when we say, why are you doing this? You say, we don't mean it, it's rhetorical. But when we call you part of axis of evil, you think we mean it. So this is the other contradiction. In Iran, you have a variety of forces now. Most important force, in my opinion, that resulted in Khatami and is women. Women are the most progressive force in Iran. Because one of the things Khomeini did, maybe he did not want, by allowing women to be educated, allowing women in the workforce, allowing women to be able to drive, to travel. Sure, if you're married, you have to get permission while you're going and so forth from your husband. At least that was the case. But most important thing still is the fact that Iran is the youngest country, one of 2, 3 youngest country, when 70% of your population is under 30. And employment is an issue. And the Constitution, the reason I quoted 79 Constitution approved by Khan, makes economic welfare, not spiritual welfare alone, but economic welfare, equality, access, all of this as a right. And when Ahmadinejad promised to share the oil revenues for newlywed couples and so forth. So in press conferences, I saw people questioning him, where is it? Where is the beef? Where is it? For him to give $1 billion to Venezuela or to struggling anti-American thing and not spend in Iran is, well, it makes headlines. Second thing is, Iranians, and I hope there are not many, I'm not trying to offend, I'm trying to praise. Iranians are the smartest people, other than maybe Chinese, in the world, because they know how to size you up. And that's a situation. You can walk from that door now, and you're a sergeant. So I will call you, Lieutenant, when did you come? Now, if you say, can't you see I'm a sergeant? I say, I apologize. I thought you were lieutenant. Namely, you haven't made it yet. On the other hand, if you don't correct me, I know you're a vain person, I can do it. Whole Iranian history is full of loophole. If I could describe Iranian history, you find a loophole. If nobody has bothered, then you build a structure there. And therefore, structure becomes legitimate. The other thing is, you don't oppose people in Iran. That's the only thing Iranians and Japanese have it. One of my favorite expressions is ikhtiyar darid. You can insult somebody if you're powerful, they say ikhtiyar darid, which has 20 different meanings. It means you don't mean it. Who the hell are you to tell me this? How wonderful of you to tell me this? So forth. It confuses all the diplomats. They report back to London. I was with the Iranian diplomat. He said, well, ikhtiyar darid. Yes, thank you very much. Je vous en prie. I beg your pardon. But he did not say no. Because it was most subtle diplomatic language and all the nuances and ambiguities. And they've learned 2,500 years to negotiate with Rome, with Byzantium, with the Macedonians, and with Arabs, and everybody. The mastery of finding a way to accommodate. So Iranian revolution, by allowing certain things that could not change, allowed these loopholes to build forces. Freedom of democracy, because they overthrew the Shah because there were no free elections. They could not have, women were the ones counting. Hundreds of us are standing there. How many of you going to vote for you? They know. We go there if we did not have equal number of votes. We know there was some kind of fraudulent election. They're observant, they're involved, and also students have nothing to lose now because they're competing. They want the same thing as Chinese students. There's so much parallel there. They want the best education. Technology, Islamists are not against technology. They're not against science. It's in humanities and law that interprets, that gets people problem, not science. And it's the first successful uterus transfer in the world was done, guess where? In Saudi Arabia. First, they have surgeons, and they're not against medicine, they're not against science. It's humanities and interpretation of Quran and laws that gets. So Iranians also are there. As a matter of fact, I was told, I read it in Christian Science Monitor, there's a female Ayatollah now in Iran, or the rank equivalent of. Now that will be complete revolutionary, almost allowing women to interpret the law because you cannot directly sit with men other than television and so forth, and then be instructed, given legal result, because they say, I cannot learn, but authorize me, deputize me for me to go and teach. The other thing that is happening in Iran is the bazaar. No revolution has happened in Iran without the bazaar. Bazaar is the commercial establishment. So you have that establishment, you have religious establishment, you have university establishment, and then you have unemployed people and inflation in the past. All these forces are trying to do, and you saw the same thing in China, 20,000 students refusing to leave their dormitories until jobs are guaranteed. Another big demonstration, they want their university, which is not well known, the degree, to be superimposed by a more prominent university's degree. We ask, we're graduate of X, why don't you give me a Rice degree? And that, because you're authorized anyway as government, so I can get a job. You have unleashed a force without resources is very dangerous. When you mobilize, it's very hard to demobilize. And that's what happened to Khomeini. That's how he came to power. Mossadegh mobilized in 1951 religious establishment. Once he accomplished his deeds, he sent them back to the mosque. In 1978, the left and the liberals and others who organized and mobilized all the forces against the Shah, religious authorities refused to go back to the mosque. They became in charge. So it's a kind of coexistence between all these factions, plus lots of money. Unfortunately, for the Iranian reformers, the Revolutionary Guards, the television, the oil revenues, and Ministry of Justice, all controlled by the spiritual leader. But when spiritual leader goes, keep your eye on Rafsanjani, who's part of the Council of Guardians, because they'll be electing a spiritual leader. So it's a fascinating criminology. Exactly, those of you who are in the Soviet period, you saw who's standing with whom, who spoke 3 minutes, who spoke 10 minutes, whose editorial was published. Then you'll be able to understand the complexity of Iranian regime or government.
Our policy in '53 to overthrow Mossadegh, obviously in hindsight, a lot of academic ink has been dropped on that, as if we had recognized the forces of nationalism at the time, perhaps Iran today would be a viable democracy, and secular, and we would not have had Khomeini. Do you?
Well, I'm a historian, not a politician. I only deal with the past. I cannot say what would have happened, but I can tell you one thing. Mossadegh was a symbol of Iranian nationalism against British colonial empire. They wanted America to defend them, decolonization of Iran. And that's one of the reasons why he's revered. If the Shah had not put him on trial, it would not have been as bad. But for months, it was broadcast his trial, because he was the one, ladies and gentlemen, that established, before Soviets came in, the British came in 1941, when Iran was invaded. He passed in the parliament a law that as long as there are any foreign troops on Iranian soil, no concessions can be given about oil. And that's how he became national hero. Nobody dared to bring any agreement to the parliament while Soviet troops and British and Americans were there, because he would automatically consider trying to betray the interests of Iran. So from 1941 on, he was symbol of Iranian nationalism. And people who joined Americans in overthrowing, ironically, Mossadegh, there was also Ayatollah Kashani and some Ayatollahs. But nobody wants to mention that some of the clergy also connived in the process of getting the demise of Mossadegh. What would have happened? I think maybe there would have been secular nationalist Iran.
There is, in certain quarters, the threat is defined as Iran's influence now is becoming greater and greater because of Iraq, because of its influence with the Shiites in Iraq. Although they're Arab Shiites, still Iran has a great deal of influence, people like Hakim and others. There are important Shiite populations in Bahrain, in northeastern Saudi Arabia, in Lebanon, Hezbollah, etc., etc. This talk, in my eyes, is not very accurate, but that there may be emerging a Shiite axis in the Middle East that will be confronted by a Sunni axis led by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and some of the largest Sunni countries. What do you make of all that?
Well, it's a very difficult question, because on the one hand, the Shias are only ones like Vatican, which have a hierarchy. Nobody can just get up and issue a fatwa, opinion, and so forth, because they just want to. You have to justify. They're the only ones who have a kind of hierarchy of titles. At the same time, we saw that during Saddam Hussein, Iraqi Shias fought against Iranian Shias because they were Arab nationalists. I think one of the phenomenon has been underestimated, in my opinion, is the force of nationalism. To what extent nationalism can trump over religion. And we see that all over, Catholics fighting Catholics, because Polish nation is more important than Austrian nation. So religion throughout history has been important, but I found that in the 19th century and later, nationalism has been a force. To what extent this will be the case, I do not know. Second, if you start a sectarian war, it will not be contained. It will be a Spain for the region. What Spain was in 1930, people will fight proxy wars there. So that's why.
One more comment, and then we'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. Do you agree that one thing that we, especially in the United States and our foreign policy establishment, have underestimated is the role of religion and culture in foreign policy, and that in order for the United States to conduct more responsible foreign policy, especially what we've witnessed in the last 8 years, 10 years, that the role of religion and culture must be inculcated into the people who serve our country, either in the State Department, the Foreign Service, in the military, the intelligence services, but our politicians also have to have an understanding of this. It's not irrelevant, because the period of your good friend Dr. Kissinger, realpolitik and balance of power, politics, economics, military, but that the role of religion and culture are highly underestimated.
Well, let me just mention that I mentioned Dr. Kissinger. Recently at a meeting, he spoke about Iraq, and then the person who was presiding over the meeting asked me to respond or comment on. And my notion was that all the political theorists, game theorists, and economists and others considered everything, realpolitik and so forth, a chess game. Policy is a chess game. You know what assets you have, and you move your asset this, asset that, and so forth. It doesn't matter whether you put yarmulke on pieces of chess game if you're a Jew, you put turban if you're an Arab, or you put some tiny Confucian kind of beard on a Chinese on the pieces, or Vishnu, whatever. It doesn't matter. Chess is chess all over the world. But I said, nobody writes about the table on which you play chess. That's the most important thing. Table is religion, history, nationalism, biases, tribal values, all kinds of values. And when you play chess, table starts moving, you get very upset. Said, can't you see we're playing chess? Stop it. And I said, we all are into the generalizations and defy nuances and ambiguities. And then the other thing, which we have never paid attention, face saving, whether personal relations or others, is the most important thing in foreign policy when you deal with different cultures. If you defeat someone, you don't have to advertise. But we need advertising before Congress, and it's an investment. Our investment paid off, we have to say, what are the returns? And having been born in Iran, left I was 14 and a half, still have retained some of the things. With the unions, when I dealt at Brown University, I never told them they were defeated. Never. I told the leadership, look, you give me what I want, I'll say you want, if you want victory, because you have a constituency. I have my constituency, you. My predecessor and few others had advertised, if the union members had taken his proposal, they would have made 10% more. Namely, union leadership is dumb, saying. But next time you know they're going to come up with vengeance, you call them dumb, incompetent, and so forth. Never did that. As a result, I can tell you, maybe I shouldn't, but I'll tell you, Brown is the only Ivy League university when clerical and technical staff is not unionized. Because I was one step over them, respected all, went to funerals, went to meetings, but always knowing, don't humiliate someone. Out of humiliation comes, Machiavelli said this better, don't humiliate, out of humiliation comes desperation, out of desperation come terrible acts. So this knowledge is a must, because if we are the only superpower, we know who are the others we deal with. For us, not knowing that Sistani is Iranian, born, Persian-speaking. He could not even vote this last election because he's an Iranian citizen. Anybody who looked at the map of Iraq could see there's no region called Sistan. Sistan is from Iran. It's a must. You don't have... The same thing, I was very upset with McNamara. If you saw Fog of War, last line is, Vietnam's defense minister said, how come You thought we're stooges of China when we're 1,000 years we've been fighting Chinese. And McNamara said, I didn't know that. Well, by God, I almost fell off my chair. You don't have to need secret CIA briefing to know that. It's an Encyclopedia Britannica. Just read one-page Encyclopedia Britannica about Vietnam. Namely, knowledge is essential, not just religion. Knowledge is essential in order to be able to fulfill one's historical responsibilities as superpower and as leader. So my thing would be, to ask everybody to take cultural history, social history, economic history, and also history of ideas to know whom are you dealing with. What are their customs? You don't take dog to Iraqi homes to sniff for weapons when the worst curse in Arabic is Ibn Khal, the son of a dog. It's considered dirty. You should know that from elementary school. The same way you don't take pigs to Orthodox Jewish shops to sniff for possible drugs or so forth. There's certain things we should know. It's a common sense to know whom you're dealing with. Anyway, I don't want to go on. That's my stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen, questions? We have our very good assistants with a mic. Just raise your hand if there are questions. There we go.
What's the relative educational level of the young people in Iran today compared with various other countries?
Well, one of the fascinating things for me was to find how many of them have technical knowledge but not humanistic knowledge. Because Iran needs engineers and doctors. They've copied some of the plans of Cuba to provide village doctors and so forth. And you have people still, believe it or not, former foreign minister of Iran is a graduate of University of here, not Rice. What's the other one here? University of Houston. The son of foreign minister of Iran is PhD candidate in City University of New York. So you have hundreds of thousands of students who have been educated here. Most of the Iranian leadership during revolutionary time came from European and American universities. And it's not surprising. The new generation that is resorting to humanistic knowledge through poetry, through Iranian literature, because their opposition comes through allegory rather than symbolic, rather than actual. You always tell a story. If you want to criticize someone, you tell a story. You don't criticize. Because there is this fictitious character called Mullah Nasreddin or Hoja Nasreddin. You always build a story around him. One story is you go to a tea house, everybody's big, heavy, and there's one lemon. There's no more lemon left for the tea. This small man, tiny, comes and he squeezes lemon, lots of juice comes. And they all say, who is he? He said, the local taxman. Therefore, nobody can say you're criticizing the regime. You just are telling stories from medieval period. And that's one of the things I'm fascinated to what extent oral tradition, jokes. One of the things recently, again, I was astonished how Iranians, when they start making fun of you, you know there's problem. I saw that on the press conference that Ahmadinejad gave in Iran, there was Agha, which means sir, doctor, that surprised me. I said, I did not know Ahmadinejad is doctor, engineer, Ahmadinejad. Then I found out he has a doctorate from a provincial university in traffic management. Now, when you put for president name without his asking to do, it means you already are working around the thing. You're not doing anything bad. You're just recognizing his titles and so forth. So that kind of thing exists. But the level of thirst for education is incredible. Because through internet cafes, and then also remember, from America, Europe, you have hundreds of thousands of Iranians in daily communication with Iran. Because you cannot cut all the phones. The transistor has, and then satellites have ruined any control by governments over information. So everybody is well versed about what's happening and here and there. And they know that Some of the rich people's children are in Switzerland, United States, and England, and others. And it builds cynicism. And what all pure puritanical movements have always suffered is by their contradictions, when cynicism starts becoming a corrosive force of their purity. And that's one other thing. There's lots of criticism in Iran about expenditures and others and questioning.
This isn't a question. I was in Iran in November of 2005 for about 3 weeks as a tourist. There were 6 people in our group, and we toured all over the country in a bus. And I just wanted to say what a wonderful, wonderful time we had, how welcome we felt. People came up and talked to us, asked where we were from, said welcome over and over again. They wished more Americans would come. Many of them had friends and family in the United States. Many of them had studied in the United States. And it was just an entirely positive experience.
Well, I'm glad. There's problem. I have not been in Iran since 1978. Not because of regime and other things, because I do not believe in dual citizenship. Many Iranians travel to Iran with Iranian passport because Iran does not recognize naturalization. So when Khatami was here, he invited me to go to Iran. I said, I'll be happy to come with an American passport. Then he was taken aback. Not only I am considered still Iranian, but my wife, my children are considered also Iranian by marriage. So if they decide to go, if they don't list that their father was born in Iran, they're welcome. But this was true even under the Shah. You don't believe in it. So having taken an oath to be allegiance to the United States of America, I don't think I can afford or want to have another citizenship. They say, because if I go to Iran with Iranian citizenship, maybe they can say, I owe taxes since when I left 14 years old or whatever. I have no idea, arbitrary thing, you never know. So I said, I'll be happy to come to Iran whenever you invite me to come. And my wife and I were going to Iran in '76 under the Shah, and I still had retained my citizenship because my family was there. And so they said, your wife has to be an Iranian citizen. She says no. Or my dead body, I'll go anywhere without my American passport. So I said, well, I cannot come because my wife does not want to come with an Iranian passport. Oh, don't take it seriously. We'll see what we can do. So they stamped my passport, Vartan Gregorian, unaccompanied, and they stamped my wife's passport, Claire Russell Gregorian, unaccompanied. Then they put us together in the same hotel, the same thing, the formality. So I don't want to play those games because then you would be told, if I'm, let's say, quote unquote, arrested in Iran, Americans interview, they say, no, he's an Iranian citizen. Not that I would be arrested, but I'm just saying, so I envy people who go and come back because it's a beautiful country and smart people.
I can't tell whether I should be optimistic or pessimistic based on the comments, which I've enjoyed very much this afternoon. What strikes me most is, as we've been fortunate enough to travel in different parts of the world and visit various universities, I always ask the same question as I move around, whether it's Japan or Korea or China or Eastern Europe. The ratio in graduate school, for example, of people in the humanities and the people in the sciences and the applied sciences, the ratio is so out of whack, and that you're describing the same thing in Iran, and yet at the same time you're suggesting that if we're going to have some kind of world harmony, that realpolitik plays a role, but not without an understanding of the belief systems and the values of the cultures that are moving those pieces on the chessboard. Here you are running one of the most important foundations, endowments in the world. Tell me how you handle that issue.
I was hoping you would ask that. So I can end up on a positive note. This small booklet that I wrote was a report to my board, because long before 9/11, I was very worried that Americans only know about black Muslims. And among black Muslims even, they know about Farrakhan because of his anti-Semitism. But they did not know Elijah Muhammad's son, Walid, who's in charge of 500,000 regular Sunni Muslims in Chicago. He never makes the headlines because he's not anti-Semite, he's not this and that. So I invited 20 different representatives of Muslim communities in Iran, in the United States. And I was surprised about divisions of theirs. Along racial line, language line, African Americans who converted to Islam resented the condescension of Arabs who came to talk to them. Pakistanis were looked down by Gulf people. Saudis distrusted them. Turks were offended if you call them Muslim, and Iranians offended if you can tell them they're Turks and Arabs. As a matter of fact, the Shah offended many Arabs, but everywhere he went said, first, let me tell you, we're not Arabs. As if some. But even the greatest poet of Iran, Firdousi, 11th century, wrote a poem, which even now, nationalistic, that's why I wanted to tell. He said, those worm, Arab is so smart, those insect and locust-eating Arabs, camel-eating Arabs, imagine their temerity that they are coveting the king of king's throne. This is a Muslim poet writing. It would get contempt that Arabs vanquished Iran. So the nationalistic thing, which always surprised me. Now, therefore, out of this came the notion that there's a mosaic. Who prays, where they pray, and so forth. I should not be confused solidarity with unity, expressions of solidarity with unity. And they came 9/11. And then I found that other than Mecca, America has the largest representation of Muslims from all over the world. All over the world. You mentioned, so we have this. And I was hoping that American Muslims, educated ones here, professionals, and so, would be a major force in the future in challenging the rest of the Muslim world. And therefore, started building a kind of knowledge pool. We have trying to publish 100 texts, 19th and 20th century texts, secular writers, religious writers, who explained what is Islam's role in vis-a-vis women, banking, international law, tolerance, Abrahamic faiths, what's their attitude of Judaism and Christianity, all of that. And with modern introductions, and put them on the web in order to make available all over the world for any Muslim who would like to see that this current debate is not current debate. For 2 centuries, this debate has been going on. Second, to build in America a pool of talent. So we established the last 3 years, 4 years almost now, 20 scholarships a year, each one 100,000, to be given to an American, regardless whether they're Turks, whether they're Persians, Iranians, whether they're Arabs, whether they're Jews, whether they're Buddhists, whatever, who are investing their time to study Islam, a phenomenon, from Morocco all the way. So far, we have 81 of them. And I'm hoping within next year, we'll have 100. Almost everybody you see other than Ambassador Jerejian, practically most of them are from these Carnegie Fellows, Noah Feldman and Vali Nasr and so forth. But then, I also thought we're a visual society, not reading society, unfortunately. So also I'm talking to Charlie Rose to see whether or not every year we could have 100 interviews with leading Muslim and non-Muslim leaders about who speaks about Islam and what is Islam. Because one of the major frustrations of mine is that during Renaissance and Reformation, the church, both Protestant and Catholic church, used religion to advance secular goals. Luther was loved by everybody because Luther said, rulers are kings, lieutenants of king on earth. Whoever revolts against the ruler revolts against God. And remember during Peasant Rebellion, he said, kill them all because they have risen against God. Earthly church was not that important as invisible church. The prince could appoint bishops, tax, and so forth. They were not important. Now, all over the world, religious forces are using secular power to advance religious causes. But without one thing, without major theological dispute. Where are the current Erasmuses, Calvins, and Luthers, and on and on? You don't see them. And that's one of my hopes, that American Islam from America, could challenge with the means a dialogue. Because I'm not, we were both in Doha, U.S. Islam conference. Well, I'm pleased that there are only a handful of religious people come. So religious people issue legal opinion, politicians pick and run, but nobody says on whose authority, who signed you to issue, who are you? So one of the things I was suggesting facetiously, that you put all of these clergy's pictures on the news magazines as greatest thinkers since Middle Ages, and then let them question each other, fight each other, and so forth, to bring some kind of room, provide room, elbow room for critical debate, which is not happening now. Shias are the only ones, ironically, where I was asking, have structured debate, because you question. Khamenei does not have the scholarly standing in the Shia legal community. So that was one of my hopes. And that requires humanism. So I'm trying to encourage humanism. The other thing we're doing is in Africa, every president of African university that we support has come and said, please, you're doing a great job, science, technology, please don't leave humanities to languish. The same thing in Russia. When the Soviet Union fell, we proposed at Carnegie to help 11 universities with MacArthur and others, because we did not want intelligentsia of Russia to be disaffected from democracy. And we did not go to Moscow and St. Petersburg. We went to Siberia and all over regional universities of Russia. Helped 3,500 Russian scholars, 8,000 to 10,000 Russian graduate students with small amounts of money, in order to keep their dignity and their involvement in the humanities. So African leaders are asking me the same thing. We need to reinvigorate African humanities. Because otherwise, if in the West you write their history, later they're going to say Orientalism and this and so. So you need indigenous groups to be able to do that. So I'm very much concerned about humanities and liberal arts. So I'm glad I'm at Rice University, where distinguished president believes in things, because the rest of the world wants to imitate us now, and we're imitating them. That what we need is more engineers, more technologies. There's nothing wrong with them. But technology is only a means. And I'm not enamored, by the way, with all the computers, because I tell students, connectivity does not guarantee connection or communication. And I quote them, Mark Twain, when Maine was connected to San Francisco, Mark Twain said, Maine has been connected to San Francisco, and Maine has nothing to say to San Francisco. So that's one of the things. We need meaning in what transmits rather than merely connectivity.
Dr. Gregorian, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.